A distinct scent of political upheaval hangs over the Pacific region. Just a few weeks ago, the world was discussing a historic trade deal between the United States and Japan, personally presented by Donald Trump. It was meant to symbolize America's return to industrial leadership, reduced tariffs, hundreds of billions in investments, and a revival of automobile exports. But suddenly, like a bolt from the blue, news arrived from Beijing that literally shocked political and financial circles. China and Japan had secretly concluded their own agreement, far larger and deeper than the US-Japan deal. According to Reuters and the South Korean outlet The Chosun Ilbo, the negotiations had been conducted in complete secrecy over the past 3 months, with the final round taking place in Korea during the APEC 2025 summit under the personal supervision of Xi Jinping. Sources close to Japan's Ministry of Economy claim that the deal has practically buried Trump's proposed agreement. According to a leak published by Nikkei Asia, China offered Tokyo unprecedented terms: zero tariffs on Japanese cars and electronics, guarantees of rare earth supplies, and the full removal of export restrictions on lithium, magnesium, and rare alloys. All of this in exchange for one thing: a partial transition to settlements in yuan and yen, and a gradual abandonment of the dollar in bilateral trade. This decision came as a shock to Washington, as dollar control over Asian settlements had been a key tool of American influence for the past 50 years. Financial Times wrote that Beijing had effectively snatched a strategic ally from the United States using soft economic power. Trump, according to his advisors, was furious. Behind closed doors, he called it a betrayal of an ally and a capitulation to Communist China. However, Tokyo's response was cold. In a televised speech by the new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, broadcast by NHK, she stated that Japan chooses supply stability and technological cooperation over tariff threats. Experts from the Council on Foreign Relations called this the most painful diplomatic blow to the United States. In the corridors of the Asian Economic Forum, discussions have already begun that this deal opens Japan's path to an expanded BRICS Plus format. According to unconfirmed reports from the South China Morning Post, Beijing is offering Japan observer status in BRICS as early 2026. At the same time, China is prepared to allocate over 600 billion yuan for joint technological funds, reportedly involving SoftBank and BYD. The Washington Post wrote in an editorial that China had carried out a diplomatic operation comparable in scale to a coup, and sources inside the White House said that Beijing had literally torn from Trump's hands the agreement he had spent months preparing. A leak published in Politico claimed that at the very moment the U.S. delegation was waiting for Japanese representatives in Washington, they were already in Korea signing a memorandum of understanding with the Chinese side. In exchange for tariff concessions, China achieved its main goal: joint control over logistics routes for semiconductor component supplies. Under the new agreement, Japanese companies Sony, Toshiba, and Denso will gain access to Chinese industrial parks in Guangdong and Hangzhou, where joint production lines for next-generation microchips will be launched using architecture compatible with the Chinese Longxin standard. According to Nikkei analysts, this marks Japan's gradual shift away from the American ARM architecture, which could lead to a technological divide in Asia. Xi Jinping has already called the deal a new page of Asian unity, and Chinese media are calling it the trade pact of the century. CNN quoted an anonymous State Department official who called the incident the biggest foreign policy failure of Trump's administration. According to the Financial Times, the White House is preparing retaliatory measures, including the introduction of new tariffs on Japanese goods and the temporary suspension of certain investment programs. But as Bloomberg notes, this reaction comes too late. Japan has already effectively chosen its course toward integration into China's economic orbit. Beijing, meanwhile, is using the success of the deal as a symbol. After years of US pressure, China not only endured but seized the initiative, proving that it is now the one setting the rules of the game in Asia. Even South Korean analysts from KBS News point out that China for the first time waged a trade war on its own terms and won. This became possible because Beijing acted quietly, methodically, and strategically. It did not apply pressure through threats. It offered an alternative: At the moment when Washington spoke of sanctions, China offered investments. When Trump raised tariffs, Xi offered access to resources. And as developments have shown, that approach proved to be the winning one. Now the entire world's attention is focused on the consequences of this deal. According to the think tank Eurasia Group, immediately after the signing of the agreement between China and Japan, consultations began with several other Asian countries, including South Korea, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Insider reports from China's Ministry of Commerce indicate that this concerns the creation of a new regional alliance under the working title Asia Without Tariffs, which will become a direct competitor to the US-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework Initiative. Amid these developments, panic has intensified in Washington. Politico reports that Trump urgently convened a meeting of the National Security Council and instructed the Treasury Department to draft a plan to contain Asia's pivot. However, experts are convinced that the moment has already been lost. Major Japanese corporations have begun switching payments for raw materials and components to yuan, and according to Bloomberg Economics, the Bank of Japan is considering placing part of its foreign reserves in Chinese government bonds. This event has become not just an economic step, but a tectonic shift in global trade. It is now Beijing, not Washington, that defines the architecture of the new Asia. And although Japan officially continues to call the United States its strategic partner, confidence is growing within the country that the future lies in cooperation with China. As the Financial Times notes, Washington has lost its game in Asia, and Beijing has finally become the one writing the rules. Meanwhile, a quiet but noticeable restructuring of domestic policy has begun in Tokyo. According to the Japan Times, a special parliamentary commission on expanding economic cooperation with Asian partners has already been established, bringing together representatives of the business elite and the country's largest corporations. Behind the scenes, it is said that this commission will become the launchpad for Japan's further integration into economic structures led by China. The influential Mitsubishi Corporation has announced the creation of a joint fund with China's CITIC Group worth 200 billion yen to invest in infrastructure projects across Asia. At the same time, Japanese media report on the planned visit of Xi Jinping to Tokyo in the spring of 2026, the first in almost 11 years. According to sources from Kyodo News, the visit will be accompanied by the signing of a package of new agreements in the fields of energy, transport, and technology, including the joint development of next-generation batteries. Amid these developments, accusations from Washington toward Tokyo are growing louder, but Japan is responding with increasing indifference. America no longer dictates the terms, said one member of parliament quoted by the Asahi Shimbun. And if until recently Tokyo was considered America's main Asian ally, now, after the deal with China, it is becoming the bridge to a new economic era, where the dollar is no longer the primary instrument of power, and the yuan has become the new currency of influence.